Right off the bat, think about the Amazon rainforest. For centuries, we've literally spun wild tales about it. Lost cities of gold, vanished explorers, mythical empires. But here's the crazy part. What if the actual reality hiding out there in the jungle is way more spectacular than any myth we could have possibly dreamed up? Let's get right into it. So we really have to ask ourselves, did explorers spend hundreds of years searching for the absolute wrong lost city? I mean, think about it. You had Spanish conquistadors desperately hacking through dense jungle looking for literal cities made of solid gold. You had famous British explorers like Percy Fawcett vanishing without a trace while hunting for the legendary lost city of Z. We've been so incredibly hyper-focused on these fantastical Hollywood-style myths that we completely missed the highly engineered ancient civilizations that were sitting right under our noses the entire time. To be fair, though, we are talking about a totally uncompromising scale here, 5.5 million square kilometers. That's the size of the Amazon. To put that into perspective, that is larger than the entire continent of Europe. When you've got a tropical wilderness of that sheer magnitude with vegetation so unbelievably thick it actually blocks out the sun, well, it's pretty easy for massive, sprawling secrets to stay completely hidden from the outside world.
But before we dive into the groundbreaking new discoveries, we gotta clear up the most famous myth of them all, El Dorado. Now in Spanish, El Dorado just means the golden one. But historically, it was never a city, not even close. The real story traces back to the Muisca people up in Colombia's Central Plateau. These guys were master goldsmiths, and whenever they inaugurated a new ruler, called a zipa, they threw this incredible ceremony. The zipa would literally cover his entire body in sticky tree resin, blow pure gold dust all over himself, and ride a raft out onto Lake Guatavita. He'd be shining like the literal sun, making offerings to the gods. But when the Spanish caught wind of this, man, their greed just took over. They figured, hey, if one single ceremony uses that much gold, the city itself must be built out of the stuff. And just like that, a guy's ceremonial nickname was totally misunderstood as an entire golden metropolis.
And that one misunderstanding sparked a deeply destructive, centuries-long obsession. I mean, back in 1537, Gonzalo Jimenez de Quesada actually tried to partially drain Lake Guatavita, and he managed to pull up a bit of gold. Then by 1580, Antonio de Sepulveda tried a massive drainage project where, tragically, a lot of workers died. People were so absolutely desperate to find this fictional city that they spent hundreds of years wrecking a sacred lake. It actually wasn't until 1965 that the Colombian government finally stepped in to protect it. And then, brilliantly, in 1969, explorers found this spectacular golden Muisca raft in a nearby cave. It perfectly depicted the zipa and his attendants, proving once and for all that the El Dorado ceremony was historically real. The Golden City, however, was not.
So here's the crucial takeaway for this explainer. The real lost cities of the Amazon weren't made of gold. They were made of earth, wood, and frankly, brilliant engineering. And they were hiding right there in plain sight. For decades, traditional archaeologists just stubbornly insisted that the Amazon was quote-unquote unsuitable for civilization. They thought the soil was way too poor for anything beyond small nomadic groups. But in 2024, the scientific community was completely rocked. Scientists discovered ancient, sprawling metropolises, proving definitively that the Amazon once hosted massive, highly complex societies. So how on earth did we suddenly find these massive cities after missing them for literally centuries? The secret is this incredible piece of tech called Lidar. It stands for light detection and ranging, and it is basically a magic key for archaeologists. You mount a Lidar scanner to a plane or a helicopter, and it fires millions of little laser beams straight down at the ground. Those beams hit the surface, bounce back up, and by measuring the exact fraction of a second it takes for that light to return, the system maps out a perfect 3D point cloud of the terrain. Then, the real magic happens. Computer software digitally strips away all the trees and leaves. It just erases the jungle, revealing the bare ground hiding underneath. This contrast perfectly shows why LiDAR is such a game changer for history. I mean, think about traditional archaeology in the Amazon. It was grueling, dangerous work. Teams would spend 2 whole years slowly hacking their way through dense, nasty jungle with machetes, navigating with just a compass and basic GPS to map a tiny area. Today, a plane flies over, and 2 hours later, you have a flawless, high-res map of the entire region. And the absolute best part is that not a single tree gets harmed. It's literally an instant digital X-ray of the rainforest.
The impact this has had on the field just can't be overstated. French archaeologist Stephen Roston, who has spent a quarter of a century studying the Amazon, summed it up perfectly. He said, "Lidar gives us the first view of what the settlement really looked like. It's truly impressive. You have to imagine it from their perspective. For archaeologists who spent their whole lives digging blindly in the mud, seeing these massive ancient structures just digitally pop out of the forest floor, it's nothing short of a miracle.
And this tech directly paved the way for the single most earth-shattering discovery of 2024. In January, the prestigious journal Science published Rostein's findings about a very specific spot in Ecuador called the Upano River Valley. His team had actually been working there for 25 years, but they were essentially looking at tiny, disconnected puzzle pieces. It wasn't until they ran a massive Lidar survey that the true, staggering scope of what was hiding in that valley was finally shown to the world.
The very first thing that absolutely shocked the scientists was the age. These settlements were built around 500 BC. That makes them an astonishing 2,500 years old. That officially makes the Upano Valley the absolute oldest complex civilization we have ever discovered in the Amazon. It predates any previously known society in the region by more than 1,000 years. Actually, scratch that. It completely shatters our established timelines for all of human history in South America.
But, it wasn't just the age that was mind-blowing. It was the sheer scale. The LiDAR scans revealed over 6,000 rectangular earthen platforms. And to be clear, these weren't natural hills. These were meticulously constructed foundations for homes, civic buildings, and huge ceremonial spaces. When you were looking at 6,000 of these platforms, you were looking at undeniable visual proof of a massive population. Conservative estimates say maybe 15 to 30,000 people live there. But other experts, they suggest the population could have easily topped 100,000 people at its peak.
We are not talking about a random collection of isolated villages here. This was a fully interconnected megalopolis. The scans showed 15 distinct settlements spread out across 300 square kilometers. 5 of these were massive major cities, places like Quilamope and Sangay, featuring huge central plazas. And connecting all of this, 25 kilometers of perfectly straight, deeply excavated, carefully planned roads. They also found vast agricultural fields with complex drainage canals to handle the intense tropical rains. They even found defensive walls surrounding the cities, which tells us they definitely had to protect themselves from outside threats. So you're probably wondering, how exactly does an ancient civilization feed up to 100,000 people right in the middle of the rainforest? Well, they were master agriculturalists. They totally took advantage of the rich, fertile volcanic soil from the nearby Sangay volcano to grow massive amounts of corn, manioc, and sweet potatoes. But it wasn't just, basic survival food. Archaeologists actually found beautifully painted pottery and jars containing the residue of chicha, which is a traditional alcoholic beer brewed from corn. So they had a really rich, thriving culinary culture too. And all of this leads us to the biggest, most crucial paradigm shift of this whole explainer. The Amazon rainforest we see today is absolutely not some untouched wilderness. For centuries, Western science just looked at the Amazon and saw pristine virgin nature that humans had never conquered. But this new data proves the exact opposite. The Amazon has been heavily shaped, cultivated, and engineered by millions of human hands for thousands of years. It's actually less of a wild jungle and a lot more like an ancient, overgrown garden. To really wrap our heads around how this giant garden grew over the cities, we need to look at the life cycle of the Upano people. Recent microfossil analysis of lake sediments tracks this beautifully. Around 750 BC, they moved into the valley and started building. They thrived there for a whole millennium. But around 250 AD, their influence started to wane. And by 550 AD, this entire massive civilization completely disappeared. The jungle just slowly crept back in. Much later, around 1500 AD, a new wave of corn farmers showed up, but they eventually left around 1800 AD. Because of that specific cycle of human habitation and abandonment, the dense, impenetrable forest canopy you see in the Upano Valley today, it's really only about 200 years old. The abrupt end of the Upano civilization leaves us with a genuinely chilling historical mystery. Why on earth did a thriving society of tens of thousands of people just vanish? Was it a massive, catastrophic eruption from the Sangay volcano, or was it more of a gradual societal decline over centuries, which some of the newer studies are hinting at? Anthropologist Jay Silverstein summed up this eerie reality perfectly. He said, "Everyone believes their society is eternal, but something happened, and they disappeared. It's just a really stark reminder of how fragile even the greatest human engineering can be."
But what's truly thrilling right now is that Upano is definitely not an isolated incident. Lidar is actively exposing an entire continent-wide network of lost civilizations. Over in the Amazonas state of Brazil, researchers just found over 100 massive geoglyphs from the ancient Aquari civilization, a society that might have once boasted 3 million people. And down in the Llanos de Mossos in Bolivia, Lidar uncovered 11 new sites from the Kasarabe culture, complete with monumental pyramids reaching up to 70 feet high. The Amazon wasn't empty, it was absolutely packed with diverse, highly advanced cultures.
So when you look at the big picture, the real treasures of the Amazon were never made of gold. For centuries, the myth of El Dorado completely blinded us. That intense greed for gold hid the astonishing truth of these ancient indigenous engineers. Today, LiDAR technology is basically acting like a time machine, actively rewriting our understanding of human history. We know now that the forest is a carefully cultivated garden shaped by brilliant agriculturalists over millennia. The conquistadors were obsessively looking for material wealth, but the greatest wealth the Amazon actually has to offer is knowledge. It's understanding how our ancestors lived in balance with this incredibly complex ecosystem. I want to leave you all with one final, pretty provocative thought. If the thickest, most intimidating parts of the Amazon forest are really just a few hundred years of overgrowth, and considering LiDAR has barely even scratched the surface of scanning that massive 5.5 million square kilometer basin, what else is hiding under the canopy? We are literally standing on the edge of a golden age of archaeology, and the jungle, it is finally ready to give up its secrets.